Click the links to join the channel here or over on Subscribestar. Thanks for everyone who has supported the channel. So I kind of have done this video, but I want to do another deeper dive into it because I think it's so important. And the actors who play these characters, Gina Carano and Henry Cavill, are indicative of the future in Hollywood because people who have a little bit of backbone, just have no place in Hollywood nowadays, at least not in the mainstream Hollywood, which is bad because a lot of that stuff comes across on screen when you're seeing real people. And the thing is, social media is public now. You see what's going on behind the scenes, and then you look at the actors who will just do whatever they're told. You know, the Zoolander joke, and you see these just spineless people who are just saying anything that's written in front of, or I guess that was the Anchorman thing also, where they will read anything that's put in front of them without any thought whatsoever. And then you see people who kind of say, "Oh yeah, we should stick to the origin story." It's like transformative versus curative, and it immediately identifies them as a wrong thinker. But it's like this is in the day of social media. You can read about all this stuff and you can see what's going on, and it makes you look at Hollywood in a different way, especially with all the other stuff that's going on with Hollywood. And like, I don't know if I want to be a part of this in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. And it's like, yeah, welcome to the party. And if I mean, there are still people who are pretending not to know what's going on with like Disney, Netflix, and Amazon, so they can still justify in their mind, like watching those channels, supporting those channels. You just can't. They're too. I mean, they're too freaking horrific. So why everything in Hollywood sucks now and won't get better? And let me use the Henry Cavill example to show the point. He left The Witcher because they were going to use it to push propaganda, and now on Twitter they're trying to tear him down. But even the things they allege are weirdly complimentary, not insults. In their world, Henry wanted to stick to the original material, and that's problematic. It's a signal that he's not on board with using films as propaganda, just because to them, that's the whole point of Hollywood. It's just to spread propaganda. They literally have propaganda checklists. GLAAD and other groups have a representation checklist, or the Bechtel test. Is even Kevin Smith made fun of that in one of his movies about amount of time women are on screen. It's like you put the point to them and ask them like, "What's a woman?" And they go, "Oh, you guys have one joke." And I go, "Yeah, yeah, okay, maybe there are some shitlords on the right. I'll give you that. But what's a woman?" And it's like, yeah. So I mean, couldn't we satisfy the Bechtel test by saying for the purpose of this film they all identify as women, and they all identify as POCs? And it's like, yeah, I'm joking, but the point is made, isn't it? I mean, I think there was a British guy, some kind of representative guy who they needed a situation like that. So on the Thursday meetings, he identified it as a woman for the sake of the meeting, so they had representation. It's like, modern problems require modern solutions. Anyway, so yeah, representation checklists from GLAAD or the Bechtel stuff. That's not a film. That's literally the definition of propaganda. The left doesn't have an issue with this because if they're a public person and they speak up, then the ADL, SPLC, ACLU, GLAAD will just destroy their lives. Something like those are bad groups. I'll say that. The amount of the ADL has infinite funds. The SPLC has something like $500 million in offshore accounts with which they use to spread globalism that destroys a nation. And the ACLU has been completely subverted. Remember the Skokie, I think it was Skokie, Illinois. Even the Blues Brothers. Man, I'm just also full of references today. The Blues Brothers reference about I think it was like Illinois Hugo Boss types because they wanted to march through a neighborhood and the ACLU defended them as well they should. I remember read about that case. I found out like there were people out there who legitimately didn't support free speech, and it's like I think that started my red pill journey like 25 years ago. Anyway, so if you speak up about this, you know that you just won't work in Hollywood anymore. So Hollywood's at the point where everyone knows they're just making Bolshevik propaganda. If you like the Bechtel test or any representation checklist, it's like how do you say that with a straight face? And I look at these people and goes, "But you're asking us to make propaganda." Yes, that's right. Like literally, they have no there's no shame in their game, but they also know it's not selling too well. Hollywood knows it's underwater. They're not stupid, but they're hoping that the rate of capital decline is balanced by brainwashing the new younger audience. They're focused on generational brainwashing because keep in mind, kids' movies are friggin' horrible. Avatar was stupid, but kids loved it, and that was also full of propaganda. But it did $2.9 billion at the time, which thanks to inflation is $3.5 billion. Adult propaganda films don't do as well. In the current situation, you've got a lot of very woke cat ladies chicks who are drinking the Kool-Aid and they don't think twice about leaving the source material behind. But when you say you don't want to do that, they take it personally because it's more of an attack on them and their belief system. It's why they lost their minds over some guy in a car criticizing comics, diversity in comics from years ago. He was criticizing Bolshevism, or God, it would be fascinating to have like an off microphone discussion with him about this kind of stuff. But I mean, everyone knows what's up. It's like there's no point in talking to these people behind the scenes. He was criticizing Bolshevism, or loosely their interpretation of it. Nobody likes to be criticized, though I will say that having a very small social media footprint is very humbling and will thicken your skin. Otherwise, you just won't stay in it. I mean, there's a bunch of psychopaths out there on both sides of the aisle, to be fair. It's a good experience that the participation trophy generation can learn from, which if you, that's kind of like, there are people, at least on the West Coast, when things got woker earlier, who were like under 40 or 45, who were part of that participation trophy generation. That's how long this stuff has been out there. But anyway, if you're on the right, you're used to getting endlessly attacked. So the right has developed sort of a different perspective, because after you get called Hugo Boss 1,000 times and you look around, you realize that they call everyone that. You see the left as actual broken, crazy people who've just been beyond brainwashed. They drinking the Kool-Aid voluntarily and they're serving it up to others. It's, I guess, a sunk cost investment fallacy. They can't engage in peaceful dialogue sans ad hominem or straw man. They literally can't do it. If they hear this or something like it, their first response is, "We're not going to talk to Hugo Boss. Don't platform." You're not talking to other mature adults. You're talking to brainwashed NPCs who fear dialogue and debate. The concept of reasonable adults disagreeing without being disagreeable is a blank spot on the map to them. They can't wrap their heads around leaving the matrix, the binary of you're either a globalist or you're Roman saluting. There is no middle ground. I saw a meme on Twitter the other day, something like, discussing that binary. It's like the right wants to mass delete large groups of people from this mortal coil, and the left doesn't. It's like, do you know what a straw man is? Like, how deeply do you have to be in this brainwashed matrix to believe that there's not a spectrum of beliefs? So Henry Cavill, working on The Witcher with a bunch of woke wine, I'm sure he's listening to this, woke wine and benzo ladies, was never going to work unless it was acknowledged that he was master and that they were servant, or he was a woke gamma boy who sniffed panties and was going to do whatever they told him to do, as so many Hollywood actors will willingly do. The Zoolander thing is not so far off. You have a fundamental schism between the curative versus transformative mindset, which is an analogy for a nation versus global mindset, or at least that's my view of it. But they know this, and they understand that it's a worldview one way or the other. But the difference is if you like the story, then you want to stay as close as possible to it. You want to respect the artist's original vision, the person who created the story, the alpha and omega of the story. It's like, no, we can improve on it. But you can't, because you're not a master storyteller. If you were, you'd be telling your originals, I can improve on Slash's guitar playing. But you don't even play guitar. You don't know the first. You can't improve on it unless you're a master. They don't seem to get that, and the hubris of them blows my tits off. To them, respecting the artist's vision is horrifying, because those stories are written by Europeans, the people of the light, as the best stories are, mostly English and honorable mention to the French. And they hate Europeans. I mean, the French stuff has to be translated to English anyway to be readable, of course. But hey, they did it with Jules Verne, and that guy's like, Jules Verne's a powerhouse. But they, is that the one French author you know? There's the other guy who wrote Les Miserables, which is like 500 pages of like 9-point font. But still, it was a good book. The whole thing about staring into the water. Anyway, but they like the name recognition. So that's, okay, two French authors. They like the name recognition, the bait and switch power. And of course, when you look at these woke people and you ask them, why don't you just write your own story? They say, oh, well, and I've literally read this conversation, because, it takes time for the story to catch on. It takes, good things take time. You start something, it takes years. That's the natural order. Oh, well, we want to skip to the head of the line. But again, you're not a master comic book writer, creator, artist, musician, whatever. You're not a master. You haven't come up and learned and crafted your art and craft your skill. You haven't learned. You're just jumping to the end stage and swapping out the characters that you're standing on the shoulders of giants that like other people created for you, and you're swapping out the characters at the last moment, and you're confused why, oh, it must be istophobic for people not to want to see these swapped out characters. It's like you don't even understand what you're doing and why people hate you or why people reject what is by definition propaganda. But then why don't they write woke characters now? And the truth is they can't write new woke characters because nobody buys them, so they will never catch on. Woke stories are globalist stories, and people know it's a false god. People are tribal. Anyway, so Henry wanted to respect the material, and they knew they literally had to fire him. They didn't make the show to stick to the origin story. The only goal is his propaganda, and the women immediately got on social media to destroy him because to them, any disagreement, that show should have been printing money. It should have been like, it's not just the show, obviously. It's the merchandise and all the crap that comes along with Wheel of Time, Rings of Power, or this show. And what's the other one? Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. It's kind of four shows that could have been huge monster hits, and it's like they're not. They're just not. None of them have the energy behind them. But I think Game of Thrones has the most energy behind it. But even then, it's like yeah, it's okay for what it is, but it's not. Or the Game of Thrones, whatever the new Game of Thrones is, it's not what it could be. It's like you know, if you told these stories as the artists intended them, but they wouldn't be diverse. European people, one, are diverse, but two, even the framing of the argument doesn't make sense. That's probably not a video to go into on YouTube. They didn't make the show to make an origin story. The only goal is propaganda. The thing is, if you disagree with them, it's their belief system that you're disagreeing with, which is why if you even say that you are curative, it signals to them that you're not one of them. Think of the slow evolution that the media and universities have done with the term nationalist. They've slowly made that equivalent to Hugo Boss. Now it is a synonymous term. The media did that because the media is not the media. It hasn't been the media in decades. They have brainwashed the NPCs, and we're completely unopposed because there's no structure in place to stop it. The media can control the narrative, and they do. They don't report the news. They make the news. I mean, literally, I've seen CNN. Somebody was standing with a cell phone filming CNN. CNN was recreating a scene. It wasn't organic, which is not the actually fraudulent exactly as long as you say this is a recreated scene. CNN didn't do that. They presented it as organic. Or when they cleverly cut speakers off. It's like, we didn't edit it. We just cut her off before she said go to the suburbs and burn the suburbs down. We need our weaves. So the media can control the media, the narrative, and they absolutely do. They make the news. They can do anything they want, but the whitest of white pills is this: me and you, and presenting on mainstream tech and alt media. The mainstream media footprint is shrinking, and ours is growing, and the media hates that. They try to do everything possible to tear down anyone who's on the mainstream YouTube, of course, who's slightly off the plantation, or the alt media platforms themselves. They want to be the ones to tell you how and what to think. I'm literally quoted from MSNBC. But you have guys using Rumble, YouTube, Odyssey, Shin, getting tens of thousands of viewers on a live stream, and there are tons of guys who are doing that. The mainstream media isn't what it used to be, and it's all their own doing because they have lied for so long that nobody trusts them. Even that, to say that you don't trust the media or government and that you focus on alt media is a far-right dog whistle, because the left knows that they control the mainstream media and government, or almost all but. They know that you are not on the plantation. The shift of the left over the past 20 years has been shocking in so many ways. At one time, if you even told left-wing people that you were going to use a classic story for left-wing propaganda, they would not have accepted it, but that has all changed. The left has been completely subverted and corrupted. There's no way for a Henry Cavill guy or a Gina Carano or a couple others to survive in Hollywood now, which is a problem because people who do survive in Hollywood are going to be these panty-sniffing yes men, the Zoolander guy, like dance like a monkey. Zoolander, and the movies are going to be what you expect. Crap, there's no avoiding that. But that's also okay, also, because the more the mainstream gets worse and worse, it creates an environment where there are alternatives that can pop up. It's just like it's just economics at this point. It's the same thing that happened with Comicsgate. Mainstream comics were such bizarro anti-white propaganda, misandrist propaganda that somebody came along and go, oh, you know what? I can get on YouTube, build a channel, publicize myself, and then sell a comic kind of based on a lot of things, like legitimately a good story, but also based on a little outrage marketing, which drives the left crazy. But also it's like, yeah, but it has to fundamentally be a good story, and it will, and it was. It's like the Comicsgate got started, and you got an industry getting off the ground. It's like, no, it's not perfect, but when you look at the mainstream being such, and now mainstream comics is just imploding because they're not telling organic stories. They're telling nothing but globalist propaganda. And there's ways to tell that in a more neutral way, but they're going way, way off in the left field. Like it's just every story is blonde hair, blue eyed man. But the best example of this is if you want to start like go down the rabbit hole, go read Immortal Hulk 1 and 11. And just and there's another one later on when they have a BLT character in it. But Mortal Hulk 1 and 11 kind of like read it, think about it, and then get back to me before you say, oh, that was a great series. Like, just think about it first. Don't you think it's a little bit weird? It's weird that every gang's a blonde-haired, blue-eyed motorcycle gang. Anyway, I got off track a little bit there. Like, comment, subscribe. Check out the Odyssey, and I'll see you guys all next episode.